What would you do if your groom cheated on you on your wedding day and the only man willing to stand beside you was the most feared Mafia king in Charleston? Evie Carter thought she was walking into a church to become a wife. The candles were burning. The roses were perfect, and 200 guests were waiting for her to smile through the most important day of her life. But behind the polished doors, love had already turned into betrayal. This story is not just about revenge. It is about the moment a woman stops begging to be chosen and starts choosing herself, even if the hand reaching for her belongs to danger. Stay until the end, because every vow in this wedding comes with a price. Like this video and comment where you're watching from. The church was still waiting for Evie Carter to smile. That was the cruelest part. Nothing outside her chest had changed. The candles still burned in tall glass cylinders along the aisle. White roses still climbed the pews in soft, expensive waves. Somewhere above the basement bridal suite, an organist practiced the same hymn for the third time, each note trembling through the old stone walls of St. Cecilia's Cathedral, like a warning no one understood. Evie sat in front of the mirror and stared at the bride looking back at her. The woman in the glass was polished into someone almost unfamiliar. Her brown hair had been swept into a careful twist at the nape of her neck, every strand pinned and sprayed until it looked too perfect to belong to a living person. Her lips were painted a soft rose. Her cheeks carried just enough blush to make her look peaceful, hopeful, loved. She almost laughed at that. Loved. The word had weight when you said it out loud. It had a shape. It had rooms inside it, a shared apartment. Coffee mugs in the sink, a man's hand on the small of your back in the grocery store, a future you could describe to your mother without lying. Blake Hollis had given Evie all of that in pieces, not always enough, never all at once, but enough to keep her reaching. Her dress rustled when she shifted in the chair. It was too heavy, too stiff, too bright under the vanity lights. Blake's mother had called it timeless. Serena had called it stunning. Evie had called it expensive only in her head, because by the time she saw the price tag, everyone was already smiling too hard for her to say no. The bodice hugged her ribs until each breath felt borrowed. Tiny pearls lined the sleeves. Lace climbed to her throat in delicate patterns that made her feel less like a bride and more like an heirloom being delivered to the next family. Her mother stood behind her with trembling hands adjusting the veil. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." Evie met her mother's eyes in the mirror. Donna Carter was already crying, not loudly. Donna never cried loudly in public or near public or in any room where someone might need her to be composed. But her eyes shone and her mouth kept lifting into a smile that failed before it finished. "Mom," Evie said softly, "you're going to make me cry before the ceremony." Donna pressed a tissue under one eye. "I'm allowed. My only daughter is getting married." The words settled between them. Getting married. Evie tried to feel the wonder of it. She tried to summon the girl she had been at 23, standing in a crowded rooftop bar in downtown Charleston, laughing because Blake Hollis had spilled beer on his own shirt and somehow made it look charming. He had asked for her number with a confidence that should have annoyed her. Instead, it made her feel chosen. Blake had been bright back then. Bright smile, bright laugh, bright plans. He talked like every door in the world had opened for him, and he was kind enough to hold one open for her, too. "I'm going to build something real," he had told her on their third date, his hand wrapped around hers across a sticky restaurant table. "Not just money. A life. I want the house, the yard, the family, all of it." Evie had believed him because she wanted to, and because wanting can be a kind of blindness if you feed it long enough. The bridal suite door opened without a knock. Serena Page swept in carrying a plastic cup with a straw and the sweet smell of vanilla perfume. She looked like the kind of woman wedding photographers loved. Tall, golden, effortless. Her champagne-colored dress clung in all the right places, soft enough to look innocent and expensive enough to tell the truth. There she is, Serena said, placing a hand over her heart. My God, Evie, you look like a magazine cover. Evie smiled because smiling at Serena was a habit. They had met in college at the University of South Carolina, two girls sharing a dorm bathroom and cheap mascara. Serena had been the fearless one, the one who knew how to talk her way into parties and out of parking tickets. Evie had been the steady one, the one who remembered deadlines, carried pain relievers in her purse, and made sure Serena got home safe. For years that had felt like balance. You look amazing, Evie said. Serena spun once the skirt of her dress whispering around her legs. Of course I do. I had to honor your big day. Donna laughed gently and touched Serena's arm. I'm going to check with the florist. The roses near the altar looked a little low on water. Mom, they're fine, Evie said. They're flowers, honey. They're never fine. Donna kissed Evie's cheek carefully, then left the room in a cloud of nervous perfume and motherly panic. The door clicked shut. For a few seconds, the room was quiet except for the hum of the old air conditioner in the window. Serena looked at Evie through the mirror. You nervous? Evie reached for the cup Serena had brought. The water tasted faintly like plastic. A little. That's normal. Is it? Serena tilted her head. Evie, you're marrying Blake Hollis. Half the women in this city would kill for that. There it was. The line people always used when they thought Evie should feel lucky. Blake was handsome. Blake was charming. Blake wore navy suits like they had been invented for him. Blake knew which wine to order, which handshake to use, which older man to flatter at a charity event. He sold luxury waterfront properties to men who smiled with all their teeth, and he made people feel richer just by standing near them. But luck was a strange word for love. Luck did not explain why Evie had paid the rent 3 times when Blake's commissions came in late. Luck did not explain the credit card she had quietly covered after he promised it was just a temporary cash flow issue. Luck did not explain the nights he came home restless, smelling of bourbon and expensive cologne, staring at his phone like it might bite him. Evie wrapped both hands around the water cup. Half the women in the city don't know him. Serena's smile flickered so quickly Evie almost missed it. Well, Serena said, smoothing the skirt of her dress. You know what I mean. Evie did. She knew exactly what people meant when they talked about Blake. They meant the version he performed in public. The version who brought flowers to Donna on Easter. The version who held doors open for strangers. The version who posted photos of Evie with captions like, my whole heart, then forgot to answer her calls for 6 hours. The version Evie had agreed to marry. Serena came closer and stood behind her, taking Donna's place. Your veil is crooked. It is a little. Her fingers moved through the lace near Evie's shoulder. They were cool and quick. Evie watched Serena in the mirror. There was a faint flush high on her cheekbones. Her lips were glossier than before a soft pink shine that looked freshly applied. You okay? Evie asked. Serena's hands paused. Me, of course. You seem tense. It's a wedding. Everyone's tense. Evie almost said, You smell like Blake's cologne. But she did not. The thought rose and sank before she could touch it. Because some truths arrive early and wait politely in the corner until you are ready to be ruined. Serena finished with the veil and stepped back. There. Perfect. That word again. Evie looked at the bride in the mirror. Perfect women did not ask too many questions. Perfect brides did not mention how their groom had been sleeping with his phone under his pillow for the past month. Perfect daughters did not tell their mother that the apartment lease had Blake's name on it because he insisted it made things simpler, even though Evie paid half of everything, and sometimes more. Perfect fiancés did not admit they were afraid the man they loved might be more idea than truth. A knock sounded at the door. 10 minutes, a woman called from the hallway. Serena clapped her hands softly. This is it. Evie's stomach tightened. "Can you find Blake?" Serena turned too quickly. "What, I just want to talk to him for a second before we start." "You know you're not supposed to see him. I've seen him every morning for 3 years. I think God can handle one more." Serena laughed, but it landed wrong. "He's probably with the guys. You don't want to go down there in the dress. It'll get wrinkled." Evie stood slowly. The gown dragged against the carpet with a heavy sigh. "I'll be careful." Serena stepped in front of her. "Evie." The urgency in her voice made the room colder. Evie looked at her. "What?" For a moment, Serena's face opened. Not enough to confess, not enough to save her, just enough for Evie to see fear move behind her eyes. Then Serena smiled. "Nothing. I just want today to be perfect for you." Evie's fingers tightened around the skirt. "So do I." She moved past Serena and opened the door. The hallway outside the bridal suite was dim and narrow, lit by buzzing fluorescent strips that made everything look faintly sick. The cathedral basement was all old linoleum beige walls, storage cabinets and framed photographs from church events no one remembered. Above her, the music swelled and faded. A laugh came from somewhere near the stairwell. Someone dropped a tray in the distance and cursed under their breath. Evie lifted her skirt and walked carefully. The satin heels pinched her toes. Each step sent a dull ache up her calves. She passed the room where the caterers had stacked silver warming trays. She passed a folding table covered in extra programs. Her own face smiled up from one of them beside Blake's. Their names printed in elegant black script. Evelyn Carter and Blake Hollis. She stopped and stared at it. For no reason she could explain, the sight made her uneasy. Maybe because printed names looked permanent. Maybe because hers was about to be tied to his in front of everyone who mattered. Maybe because deep down some part of her had been whispering for months and she had kept turning up the music so she would not hear it. She kept walking. The groomsman's room was near the back corridor. Blake should have been there with his brother, his college friends, the men who had slapped him on the back all morning like marriage was a game he had won. Evie was almost there when she heard something from the service hallway. A breath. Not a word. Not even a full sound. Just a breath that did not belong to a person alone. Evie stopped. The hallway stretched ahead, yellow light pooling on the floor. To her right was the coat closet used by volunteers and cleaning staff. Its wooden door was open a few inches. Inside, something rustled. A woman whispered, "Blake, stop." Evie's heart did not break all at once. It slowed. That was worse. The whole world seemed to move through water. The organ above her became a distant roar. Her fingers loosened around the skirt, then tightened again. She stepped closer. She saw a man's hand braced against the wall. Blake's hand. She knew the watch. She had given it to him last Christmas silver with a navy face more expensive than she should have bought, but he had wanted it so badly, and Evie had loved the way his face lit up when he opened the box. Then she saw Serena's bracelet. Tiny gold links. A pearl charm. Evie had given it to her at the bridal brunch 2 days ago. Something inside Evie went perfectly still. Serena made a small sound, breathless and panicked. "We have to go. She'll come looking for you." Blake laughed softly. "Let her wait. She's good at that." The words entered Evie cleanly. No blood, no scream, no collapse. Just a sentence sliding between her ribs and finding the place where her last excuse had been hiding. Let her wait. 3 years condensed into those 3 words. Every late dinner, every canceled plan, every time Blake had said she was overthinking, every time he had kissed her forehead instead of answering a question, every time Serena had looked too comfortable in their apartment sitting on the arm of Blake's chair laughing at jokes Evie had not heard. Evie stepped backward. Her heel touched the floor without a sound. Inside the closet, Blake muttered something she could not catch. Serena gave a low, nervous laugh. The wooden door moved slightly, and Evie turned away before either of them saw her. She did not run. Running belonged to panic. Evie was somewhere past panic now. She walked back down the hallway with her spine straight, her white dress brushing against cleaning carts and old cardboard boxes. Her breathing sounded calm to her own ears. That frightened her more than tears would have. When she reached the bridal suite, Serena was not there. Of course she was not there. Evie went inside and locked the door. The click of the lock was loud. She stood before the mirror again. The bride was waiting. Same dress, same veil, same soft rose mouth, same careful hair. Same woman the guests upstairs expected to glide down the aisle like a promise wrapped in lace. Evie stared at herself until her vision blurred. A tear slipped down her cheek. It cut a black path through her makeup and stopped near her jaw. Then another came. Her chest hitched once, but no sob followed. She pressed her hand over her mouth and tasted lipstick on her palm. She thought of her father waiting upstairs in his rented tuxedo, probably checking his watch. Probably nervous, he might step on her dress. She thought of her mother fixing flowers that did not need fixing because she had no idea her daughter's life had just split down the middle. She thought of every guest sitting in the pews ready to watch Evie become Mrs. Hollis. She thought of Blake's hand on Serena's waist. Let her wait. A knock tapped against the door. Evie, Serena's voice came through bright but thin. "You in there?" Evie looked at the door. For one wild second she imagined opening it, grabbing Serena by the shoulders and demanding that she say the truth out loud. She imagined Serena crying, apologizing, explaining. She imagined Blake rushing in behind her, pale with guilt, begging forgiveness before the whole world saw what he had done. But that was a story for a different kind of woman. A woman who still believed confession meant remorse. Evie picked up a tissue from the vanity. She spat on it and scrubbed the mascara from her cheek until the skin turned red. "Just a second," she called. Her voice surprised her. It was flat, almost bored. Serena did not answer right away. "Everyone's ready?" Of course they were. Evie unlocked the door. Serena stood in the hallway. Hair-perfect lips freshly touched up. Up close, the vanilla perfume was stronger. Beneath it, faint but unmistakable, was Blake's cologne. Evie looked at her best friend and felt nothing move across her face. Serena's eyes darted to the red smear on Evie's cheek. "Are you okay?" Evie smiled. "I'm fine." The lie tasted clean. Serena searched her face looking for cracks. Evie gave her none. "You sure?" "Completely." For the first time in their friendship, Serena looked afraid of her. "Good." Evie stepped into the hallway. Her mother appeared near the stairwell, waving frantically. "There you are. Honey, they're lining everyone up." Donna reached her and took both her hands. "Oh, your hands are freezing." Evie looked down. Her fingers were pale against her mother's. "I guess I'm nervous." Donna smiled with soft sympathy. "That's normal. Marriage is a big thing." Evie almost said, "bigger than you know." Instead, she squeezed her mother's hands. "I love you, Mom." Donna's face changed. Something in Evie's voice must have reached her some small break in the surface. "I love you too. Are you sure you're all right?" Evie nodded. Because if her mother asked again, she might tell her everything. And if she told her everything, Donna would try to stop the wedding. Evie was no longer sure she wanted it stopped. That thought came quietly, not fully formed, not yet a plan, just a cold little spark. Upstairs, the organ music shifted. The processional began. Serena took her place near the front of the bridal party. Evie watched her walk away, watched the back of that champagne dress move with practiced grace, watched the woman who had held her secrets carry one of her own toward the altar. A church coordinator with silver hair and a headset appeared. "Miss Carter, your father is waiting just outside the sanctuary doors." Evie nodded. The coordinator smiled, mistaking stillness for bridal nerves. You ready? Evie did not answer. She followed the sound of the organ up the stairs. Each step pulled the dress behind her. The fabric whispered against stone. Her ribs ached under the tight bodice. Her left foot was beginning to blister. The building smelled different up here, less like storage rooms and more like polished wood candle smoke and hundreds of warm bodies waiting for a story to unfold the way stories were supposed to. Her father stood near the double doors. Tom Carter looked uncomfortable in his tuxedo, as if the jacket had personally insulted him. His hair had been combed too neatly, and his eyes were already wet when he saw her. "Oh, Evie," he whispered. The tenderness in his voice nearly ruined her. She walked to him. He offered his arm. "You look like your mother on our wedding day," he said. "Only less terrifying." A small laugh escaped her. It hurt. Mom is going to hear about that. "Not if you love me." Evie held his arm with both hands. He looked down at her. "You cold?" "A little." His smile faded. "You sure you're ready, kiddo?" There it was again. The question. The door out. The last clean chance. Evie looked at her father, at the man who had taught her to check the oil in her car and never let anyone talk down to her. Then had somehow watched her become a woman who apologized too much. She wanted to tell him. She wanted to say, "Dad, he hurt me. Dad, I think I made a mistake. Dad, please take me home." But home was complicated now. Home was the apartment with Blake's name on the lease. Home was a life built around a man who had just laughed because she was easy to keep waiting. Evie looked toward the sanctuary doors. "No," she said softly. Her father stiffened. Evie felt him turn toward her. "No." She swallowed. Then she smiled up at him. "I mean, no. I'm not cold anymore." He studied her for one long second. The organ swelled. The coordinator opened the doors. Light spilled over them. 200 faces turned. The sanctuary stretched ahead, beautiful and merciless. White roses lined the aisle. Candles flickered beneath stained glass saints. The red carpet ran forward like a wound no one had noticed yet. At the end of it stood Blake. He looked perfect. Of course he did. His tuxedo fit like money. His sandy hair was brushed back. His smile bloomed when he saw her warm and practiced and entirely false. He looked at Evie like she was the beginning of his life, not the woman he had betrayed beside a mop bucket 15 minutes earlier. Near him stood Serena. Her eyes lifted for half a second, met Evie's, then dropped. Evie felt her father pat her hand. "Easy," he whispered. "Easy, yes." That was what everyone had always wanted from her. Be easy, be patient, be grateful. Be the woman who smooths the tablecloth after someone else spills wine. Evie took her first step down the aisle. The guests smiled. Blake smiled. Serena stared at the floor, and inside the white silk cage of her wedding dress, Evie. Carter carried the truth toward the altar like a lit match cupped in both hands. The first step was the hardest, and the second was worse because it proved she could keep going. Evie moved down the aisle with her father's arm under her hand, and every eye in the cathedral pinned to her like a needle. The sanctuary had been transformed into something out of a bridal magazine. White roses spilled from brass urns. Candles floated in glass bowls along the altar steps. Sunlight passed through the stained glass and broke over the pews in strips of blue and red and gold. It should have felt holy. Instead, it felt staged. Every smile seemed too bright. Every whisper seemed sharpened. Evie could hear the silk of her dress dragging across the carpet, the small intake of breath from an aunt in the second row, the quiet click of a phone being silenced too late. Somewhere to her left, one of Blake's friends leaned toward another man and murmured something Evie could not hear. She kept her eyes forward. Blake waited at the altar, smiling like a man who had never done anything ugly in his life. That was the talent of men like Blake Hollis. They could stand beneath stained glass with betrayal still warm on their skin and look blessed. They could hold a woman's future in one hand and another woman's waist in the other, and still believe the world owed them applause. Evie's father slowed as they reached the front. His hand covered hers for a second. "You're shaking," he whispered. Evie looked up at him. "I know." His expression tightened, but the priest was smiling at them. Blake was stepping forward, and the organ music was rising to its final note. There was no room for a father's worry in a ceremony built for everyone else's expectations. Tom Carter kissed his daughter's cheek. His lips brushed the place where she had scrubbed away the mascara. The skin still burned. "Love you, kiddo," he said. Evie almost broke then. Not when she saw the closet. Not when Blake said, "Let her wait." Not when Serena lowered her eyes like guilt could become invisible if she stared hard enough at the floor. But when her father said those 3 words with no idea that he was handing her to a man who had already thrown her away, something inside Evie buckled. She swallowed it. "I love you too." Tom placed her hand in Blake's. Blake's fingers closed around hers. Warm, damp, familiar, disgusting. "You look incredible," he whispered. The words had worked on her once. A day ago, maybe even an hour ago, she might have softened. She might have blushed. She might have mistaken the hunger in his eyes for love. Now she saw the performance, the slight tilt of his head, the gentle squeeze of her hand, the practiced awe. He was playing Groom the same way he played devoted partner, successful businessman, honest man. Evie looked at the collar of his white shirt. There it was, a faint glossy mark near his jaw where Serena's lipstick had not fully disappeared. Blake followed her gaze and shifted. His smile did not fall. Not yet. The priest opened his book. "Dearly beloved," he began. The words rolled through the church soft and ancient and meaningless. Evie stood still beside Blake while the ceremony moved around her like water around a stone. She could feel Serena a few feet away. Evie did not look at her. That would come later. For now, she listened to Blake breathing. He was trying to steady himself. She could hear it, the careful rhythm of a man convincing himself that nothing had gone wrong. Maybe he thought Evie had not seen enough. Maybe he thought if he held her hand firmly and smiled at the right moments, she would do what she had always done. Make things easy. The priest spoke about love. Evie stared at the small microphone clipped to his vestment. Love is patient. Blake's thumb moved over her knuckles. Love is kind. Serena sniffed quietly behind her. Love keeps no record of wrongs. Evie almost laughed. The sound rose in her chest like a blade, but she held it there. The priest turned a page. The paper whispered. "And now," he said, lifting his eyes to the guests, "if anyone can show just cause why these 2 may not be joined in marriage, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." The pause after that line was usually ceremonial. A small breath, a tradition everyone ignored because no one came to weddings prepared to tell the truth. The church held still. Evie pulled her hand out of Blake's. His head turned slightly. "Evie." She faced the priest. "I have cause." The organist hit the wrong key. It rang out ugly and sharp, a wounded note that made several guests flinch. The priest blinked. "I beg your pardon?" Evie turned toward the congregation. 200 faces looked back at her. Friends, family, neighbors, Blake's colleagues, Serena's parents, Blake's mother in the front row with pearls at her throat and horror already blooming in her eyes. Evie could feel Blake's body stiffen beside her. "Evie," he said under his breath. "What are you doing?" She leaned toward the priest's microphone. "My groom was in the coat closet with my maid of honor 15 minutes ago." The words left her body cleanly. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the church inhaled. 100 tiny sounds rose at once. Gasps. Whispers. A woman saying no under her breath. A man coughing like he had swallowed something wrong. Blake's mother made a thin, strangled sound and gripped the edge of the pew in front of her. Serena went white. Not pale. White. All the pretty warmth drained out of her face until she looked like a wax figure dressed for a funeral. Blake grabbed Evie's wrist. "Hard. Are you out of your mind?" he hissed. Evie looked down at his hand. His fingers dug into the skin below her palm. The pressure was immediate and bruising. "Let go of me. You're humiliating me." That did make her laugh just once. A small, cold sound. "No, Blake. I'm telling the truth. You are doing the humiliating all by yourself." He leaned closer, his handsome face twisting into something she had never seen in daylight. "Shut up." Evie lifted the microphone closer. "He still smells like her vanilla perfume. Serena's bracelet is probably still caught on the closet shelf if anyone wants proof. And Blake has lipstick on his collar because apparently even on our wedding day, he could not be careful enough to respect me." Serena made a broken little sob. "Evie, please." Evie finally looked at her. There was a time when Serena's tears would have moved her. Evie knew all the versions of Serena's crying. The dramatic cry after breakups. The drunk cry in college bathrooms. The soft, wounded cry she used when she wanted forgiveness before admitting fault. This one was different. This one was fear. "Please," what Evie asked. Serena's mouth opened, but no answer came. Blake tightened his grip. "You think this makes you look strong?" he whispered. "You look pathetic." Evie stepped closer to him, close enough that only he could hear her next words. "No. Pathetic is cheating in a church basement and still expecting the bride to protect your reputation." His eyes flashed. For a second, Evie thought he might actually hurt her in front of everyone. Then the cathedral doors slammed open. The sound cracked through the sanctuary like a gunshot. Every head turned. Cold air swept down the aisle, carrying the scent of rain tobacco and the street beyond the church. 4 men stepped inside. They wore dark suits cut with the kind of precision that made them look less dressed than armed. Their hands stayed loose near their sides. Their eyes moved across the room without hurry, marking exits' threats' faces. No one asked who they were. No one needed to. Charleston had families whose names opened doors. The Mercers closed them. At the center of the men stood Knox Mercer. He did not look like a man interrupting a wedding. He looked like a man arriving exactly when the room had become useful to him. Tall, broad-shouldered black suit, white shirt, no tie. His dark hair was cut short, his jaw shadowed with the kind of stubble that made him look more dangerous rather than careless. He moved down the aisle with quiet control, each step unhurried, each breath owned. The murmuring died before he reached the 3rd row. Evie had heard his name, of course. Everyone in Charleston had. Knox Mercer was not the kind of criminal people mentioned directly. He was wrapped in polite language. Businessman, port investor, private security consultant, donor, Mercer Holdings. But people lowered their voices when they said it. Blake let go of Evie's wrist. The change in him was immediate. His anger vanished. His face collapsed into naked fear. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." Knox reached the altar and stopped in front of Blake. For a moment he did not speak. That silence did more damage than shouting could have. The priest backed away until his hip bumped the altar. His Bible shook in both hands. Serena looked like she wanted to disappear into the flowers. Evie stood between all of them, wrist-throbbing heart suddenly too loud. Knox looked at Blake. "Mr. Hollis." Blake tried to smile. It failed. "Knox, listen. I was going to call you." "Were you?" "Yes. I just needed a little more time." Knox's eyes moved briefly over the flowers, the candles, the guests, the white dress. "You spent my time on roses." Blake swallowed. "I have the money." Knox tilted his head. "No, you don't." A ripple passed through the guests. Blake's mother stood halfway, then sat back down when one of Knox's men looked in her direction. Knox adjusted one cuff. "You moved $2.8 million through a Mercer port account. You hid the withdrawals inside a vendor contract, passed them through a consulting shell in Savannah, then used the funds to lease a waterfront apartment, buy a car you could not afford, and pay for this charming display of poor judgment." The church was so quiet, Evie could hear the candles burning. Blake's mouth opened. No sound came out. Evie looked at him as if seeing a stranger step out from behind his skin. $2.8 million. The late nights, the locked phone, the sudden gifts, the panic he hid behind charm. It had not been stress. It had been theft. Blake dropped to his knees, right there in front of the altar. His body folded so fast, Evie almost stepped back. "Please," he said. "Knox, please. I can fix it." Knox looked down at him with no visible emotion. Men who can fix things do not hide in coat closets 10 minutes before their weddings. A few people gasped again, but smaller this time. The room had begun to understand that shame was no longer the worst thing happening. Blake clasped his hands together. "I made a mistake. You made several. I was going to pay you back." "With what?" Knox asked. "The toaster ovens on the gift table." A sound moved through the room. Almost laughter, but no one had the courage to finish it. Evie stood frozen. She should have felt vindicated. She should have been glad that Blake's mask was being torn away so completely, so publicly, that no one would ever again tell her she was lucky to have him. But another feeling pressed through the shock. Fear. Not of Blake. Of the man who could make Blake kneel with one sentence. Knox turned then. His gaze landed on Evie. Everything in her body went still. His eyes were dark, but not empty. That would have been easier. Empty eyes gave nothing back. Knox's eyes gave too much. Calculation, interest, a kind of cold amusement sharpened by intelligence. He looked at the red mark on her wrist where Blake had grabbed her. He looked at the ruined place on her cheek where the mascara had been scrubbed away. He looked at the white dress, the lifted chin, the hands curled into fists at her sides. "You exposed him," Knox said. Evie's voice came out rough. "He exposed himself. I provided volume." For the first time, something shifted in his face. Not warmth. Recognition. A practical bride. "I was supposed to be." Blake lifted his head. "Evie, don't talk to him." The command snapped something. Evie looked down at the man she had almost married. "You are on your knees because you stole from a Mafia king, cheated with my best friend, and thought I would still smile for the pictures. Do not give me instructions." Blake flinched as if she had slapped him. Knox watched her for another beat. Then he looked back at Blake. "I came here to collect a debt," he said. "Instead, I find you have already lost the only valuable thing attached to your name." Blake's eyes darted to Evie. "No, she has nothing to do with this." "Not anymore," Knox said. Evie's pulse moved strangely in her throat. Knox stepped closer to her, close enough that the air changed. He smelled like cedar after rain and something metallic beneath it. "Miss Carter," he said. "Evie." His gaze sharpened. Evie. Her name in his voice sounded different, less like something owned, more like something tested for strength. "I have a problem," Knox said. "You have a disaster. There may be a solution that serves us both." Evie stared at him. This is not usually how wedding conversations go. "No," he said. "But this is no longer a wedding. It is an opportunity with witnesses." The priest made a faint choking sound. Evie ignored him. "What kind of solution?" Knox glanced toward the front row where the guests had become statues in silk and suits. "My grandfather is old, traditional, and annoyingly difficult to manipulate. He controls final authority over certain family assets. He believes a man without a wife has no discipline, no roots, no reason to think beyond his own appetite." Evie blinked. "You need a wife. I need a wife tonight." Blake made a sound from the floor. "You cannot be serious." Knox did not look at him. "I rarely waste seriousness." Evie's laugh came out small and stunned. "You want to marry me? I want to make a contract with you. In front of my family, his family, God, and everyone who just watched my life fall apart. Yes, that is insane. That depends on what you value more. Safety that was never real or danger that tells the truth." Evie hated that the words found a place inside her. Knox continued, voice low enough now that the congregation had to strain to hear. 1 year. You appear beside me when required. You attend family dinners, charity functions, business events. You convince my grandfather that this marriage is real enough for him to sign what I need him to sign. And in return, I settle any debts Blake tied to your name. I move you out of his reach. I place enough money in a trust to make sure you never again need to tolerate a man because rent is due on Friday." Evie's breath caught. Blake's face twisted. "Evie, you cannot." Knox finally looked at him. "Speak again, and I will have you removed from your own humiliation." Blake shut his mouth. Evie looked across the church. Her mother was crying now, silently. Her father had risen from the front pew, his face hard with confusion and fear. Serena stood beside the bridesmaids with both hands pressed to her mouth, eyes wet mascara untouched. Evie looked at all of them and felt the old version of herself reaching for the familiar path. "Apologize. Calm everyone down. Say there has been a misunderstanding. Let Blake explain. Let Serena cry. Let the guests leave with dignity. Protect everyone from discomfort." But the woman in the closet had heard enough. "What happens to Blake?" Evie asked. Knox's gaze returned to her. "That depends on how generous I feel after the wedding." "The wedding?" "This room is already decorated." A shocked murmur moved through the pews. Evie stared at him. "You are unbelievable." "No," Knox said. "I am efficient." Evie looked at Blake. He was staring at her with pleading eyes now. Not loving, not sorry. Pleading because she had become useful again. If she refused Knox, maybe Blake thought he could still pull her close, still use her as cover, still turn her pain into a story where he had simply made one terrible mistake under pressure. Evie looked at Serena. Serena whispered, "I'm sorry." Evie believed her. That was the saddest part. Serena probably was sorry. Sorry she had been caught. Sorry Evie had seen. Sorry the room knew. Sorry there would be consequences. But sorry was small. Evie was standing in the wreckage of a life built around small apologies. Knox held out his hand. Large, steady, dangerous. No soft promise. No romantic speech. No forever dressed up as comfort. Just a hand that belonged to a man who had never pretended he was safe. Evie heard her father say her name. Evie. Her chest tightened. She did not look back. If she looked at him, she might remember that good daughters did not step into darkness in front of their parents. Good women did not accept marriage proposals from men who arrived with armed guards. Good brides did not trade heartbreak for revenge while the candles were still burning, but Evie was tired of being good in ways that only made her easier to wound. She looked at Knox. 1 year, 1 year. No lies that put me in danger. Agreed. No touching me unless I allow it. The room went so silent it felt airless. Knox's expression did not change, but his eyes moved over her face with something like respect. Agreed. And Blake loses everything he used me to protect. Knox looked at Blake, then back at her. That was already my intention. Evie's heart beat once hard. She placed her hand in his. Knox's fingers closed around hers, warm and firm, and the church seemed to tilt around the contact. Blake made a broken sound. Evie, please. She finally looked down at him. For 3 years she had imagined him as her future. Now he looked small enough to step over. You made me wait, she said quietly. Now you can watch. Knox turned toward the priest. The old man looked as if the marble floor might open beneath him, and he would thank God for the escape. Father Knox said. The priest swallowed. Yes. Knox did not release Evie's hand. Continue the ceremony. The priest did not move. For one long, awful second, Father Callahan stood behind the altar with his mouth open, his Bible gripped so tightly that the leather cover bent under his fingers. His eyes jumped from Knox Mercer to Evie, then to Blake kneeling on the marble, then back to Knox again. The church waited with him. Every candle seemed louder than it had been a minute ago. Every breath in the room came shallow and afraid. The air smelled of wax roses, old wood, and the sharp metallic edge of panic. Knox's hand stayed wrapped around Evie's. He did not squeeze. He did not tug. He did not need to. His grip was steady enough to feel like a decision already made. Father Knox said again, his voice quiet. The word moved through the sanctuary like a blade drawn slowly from a sheath. Father Callahan swallowed. This is highly irregular. Knox looked at him. Most memorable weddings are. A nervous sound came from the pews, almost a laugh, but it died before it became one. Evie could feel her father behind her, not touching her but close enough that his worry pressed against her back like heat. She wanted to turn around. She wanted to tell him she was not losing her mind. She wanted to explain that something inside her had gone cold and clear the moment Blake told Serena to let her wait. But there was no explanation that would make this look sane. There was only the wreckage and the hand holding hers. Blake shifted on his knees. Evie, he said, voice cracking. Please, don't do this. You're angry. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but this is crazy. You cannot marry him. Evie looked down at him. His eyes were red. His hair had fallen out of place. The polished man from 10 minutes ago had been peeled away, leaving someone smaller and softer, and far less impressive. You're right, she said. Hope flashed across his face. I am angry. The hope vanished. Blake's hands trembled against his thighs. I made a mistake. No, Evie said. A mistake is forgetting the flowers. A mistake is mispronouncing someone's name during a toast. You made choices, one after another. You chose her. You chose the money. You chose the lie. And you chose to believe I would carry the shame for you. Blake's mouth closed. Serena sobbed once behind her hands. Evie did not look at her. Knox turned slightly toward the priest. Proceed. Father Callahan's face went gray. The original license was filed with another groom. Knox's expression did not change. My attorney is in the third pew. A man Evie had not noticed stood from the aisle seat, smooth and thin in a dark suit, holding a leather folder. Of course he was. Knox Mercer did not enter a church without paperwork. The attorney moved forward, opened the folder, and handed the priest a set of documents. Father Callahan stared at them like they might burst into flame. Evie watched the exchange through a strange fog. Somewhere in her mind, a calmer version of herself observed every detail and understood she should be horrified. Marriage was not supposed to happen like this. Vows were not supposed to be rearranged like seating cards. A woman did not discover betrayal, expose a thief, and become the wife of a crime lord in the space of a hymn. But the old rules had belonged to the old Evie, the woman who had walked into the church believing Blake Hollis was her future. That woman was gone. Father Callahan cleared his throat. "Miss Carter," he said, voice low, careful, almost pleading. "You understand what is being asked of you." Evie lifted her chin. "Yes." "And you consent to this marriage freely?" Her father made a broken sound behind her. Evie closed her eyes for half a breath. Freely. What a strange word. Nothing about this day felt free. Not the dress chosen by someone else. Not the smile expected of her. Not the apartment tied to Blake's name. Not the humiliation waiting if she walked out alone while everyone whispered about how she had not been enough to keep him faithful. But this choice, mad as it was, belonged to her. She opened her eyes. "I do." Knox looked at her then, not with softness, not with romance, with attention, as if that answer mattered. Father Callahan turned a page with shaking fingers. "Then we will begin again." A faint murmur passed through the room. Knox's men did not move. The attorney stepped back. Blake remained on the floor, breathing hard. Serena looked as if she might faint, but no one went to catch her. Evie stood beside Knox at the altar where she had been meant to marry another man, and the church rearranged itself around her decision. Father Callahan's voice trembled at first, then found enough strength to carry. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the presence of God and these witnesses to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." Holy. Evie almost smiled. There was nothing holy about the way Knox Mercer watched the room. He stood as still as stone, but Evie could feel his awareness spreading beyond his body, measuring every shift, every whisper, every person who dared look too long at her. He was not a groom basking in devotion. He was a commander holding hostile ground, and somehow standing beside him felt safer than holding Blake's hand had ever felt. Father Callahan looked to Knox. "Do you, Knox Mercer, take Evelyn Carter to be your lawfully wedded wife to have and to hold from this day forward?" Evie Knox said. The priest blinked. Knox did not look away from her. "She prefers Evie." Evie's throat tightened before she could stop it. It was such a small thing, barely a kindness, barely anything at all. But after 3 years of Blake calling her sweetheart whenever he wanted her quiet hearing, Knox correct her name in front of everyone felt dangerous in a different way. Father Callahan nodded quickly. "Do you, Knox Mercer, take Evie Carter to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Knox said. No pause, no performance, no smile for the guests, just 2 words clean and final. The priest turned to Evie. "And do you, Evie Carter, take Knox Mercer to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward?" Her mother was crying in the front row. Her father stood, rigid fists clenched at his sides. Blake stared up at her like she was stealing something from him. Evie looked at Knox. He was not asking her to love him. He was not asking her to forgive him later for things he had not yet done. He had given her terms. Danger. A door out of humiliation. A knife with the handle turned toward her. "I do," she said. The words did not shake. Father Callahan exhaled like a man released from underwater. The rings. Blake made a noise like he had been struck. Knox looked down at him. The ring. Blake's eyes widened. "No." Knox's voice lowered. "Do not make me repeat myself in church." The room went still again. For a moment Blake did not move. Then with clumsy fingers he reached into the pocket of his tuxedo and pulled out the small velvet box. He held it too tightly, as if the ring inside still proved something. Knox did not take the box. He waited. Blake stared at him, not understanding at first. Then his face twisted. "No," he whispered. Evie watched him open the box. The diamond sat in its white satin slot, small and bright and pathetic under the altar lights. Blake had made a show of buying it, had told everyone he had searched for months, had joked about how Evie had expensive taste, even though she had never asked for anything more than honesty. He pulled the ring free. His hand shook so badly that he almost dropped it. Knox took the ring from Blake's fingers with no expression. He held it briefly between his thumb and forefinger, then turned to Evie. "May I?" he asked. The question surprised her. After everything he still asked. Evie extended her left hand. Knox slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. Blake had measured the size of her hand accurately. He had remembered the shape of her finger. He had known how to choose the symbol, if not how to honor what it meant. The metal settled cold against her skin. Evie felt no joy, only a strange closing of a door. Father Callahan rushed now, eager to escape the moment. "By the power vested in me by the state of South Carolina and the church, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The words struck the room with almost physical force. Husband, wife. Evie Carter had entered the church to marry a liar and had become Evie Mercer in front of people who would repeat this story for the rest of their lives. Father Callahan's voice faltered. "You may kiss the bride." Evie braced herself. She expected Knox to claim her. Men like him understood audiences. They understood possession. She expected a hard kiss, a public mark, something meant to tell the church and Blake and every whispering guest that she now belonged to someone far more dangerous. Knox stepped closer. His hand rose, but he did not touch her face. He stopped just before he reached her, giving her one clean second to refuse. Evie did not move. Knox leaned in and pressed his mouth to her cheek. Barely a kiss, a warm ghost of contact just below her eye. His breath moved against her skin. "Breathe, Mrs. Mercer," he murmured. "Revenge is easier with oxygen." Then he stepped back. The room had no idea what to do with the gentleness. Neither did Evie. Knox turned toward the guests. "Thank you all for attending," he said. "The reception is canceled." No one argued. No one even breathed loudly. Knox placed his hand at the small of Evie's back. It was not forceful, but it was firm enough to guide. She felt the warmth of his palm through layers of satin and lace. The place where Blake's fingers had bruised her wrist still throbbed. Knox did not touch there. They descended the altar steps together. Blake remained on his knees. As Evie passed him, he reached for the hem of her dress. Knox stopped. The movement was so slight that it was terrifying. Blake's hand froze before it touched the fabric. "Don't," Knox said. Blake pulled his hand back. Evie did not look down. She walked. The aisle seemed longer on the way out. Faces blurred on either side of her, some shocked, some hungry, some pitying, some afraid. Phones were hidden quickly when Knox's men looked their way. Evie saw her mother rise, then sink back as her father gripped her hand. She saw Serena standing pale among the bridesmaids, tears cutting silent lines down her face. Evie kept moving. If she stopped, she would become a daughter again, a friend, a humiliated woman in a ruined wedding dress. So she stayed a wife. Outside, the sun hit her like a slap. Charleston waited beyond the church steps, bright and indifferent. Carriage wheels clattered somewhere on the street. Tourists in linen shirts paused near the iron fence, staring at the bride and the men in black suits. The air was thick with summer heat salt from the harbor and the sweet rot of magnolia blossoms. A black SUV idled at the curb. It looked too heavy for the narrow street, too dark for the afternoon. One of Knox's men opened the rear door. Evie hesitated. Behind her, the church doors groaned open. Evie. Her father's voice. It tore through her harder than Blake's pleading had. She turned. Tom Carter stood at the top of the steps, his face pale with anger and fear. Donna clung to his arm, crying openly now. "Come here," her father said. "Please, just come here and talk to us." Evie's chest ached. For a second, she was 5 years old again, standing in the driveway after falling off her bicycle, waiting for her father to pick gravel from her knee. Knox's hand left her back. The absence of it startled her. He did not stop her. He did not tell her to get in the car. He simply stood beside the open door and waited. Evie looked at him. His face gave nothing away. Then she turned back to her father. "I'm safe," she said. Tom looked at Knox, then back at her. "No, baby. You're not." Evie wanted to tell him he was right. Instead, she said, "I chose this." Donna pressed a hand to her mouth. Evie. Why Evie looked past them into the shadowed church where Blake had not yet found the courage to stand. Because I'm done being chosen last. Her father's face crumpled just enough to hurt her. Evie stepped into the SUV before he could say her name again. Knox followed. The door closed with a heavy sound that sealed off the church, the guests, the crying, the old life. Inside, the SUV smelled of leather mint and rain on wool. The tinted windows turned the street into a dim, moving picture. Evie's skirt filled half the seat. She gathered it in both hands, suddenly furious at the amount of fabric, the weight of it, the money spent on it, the lie of it. Knox tapped the glass partition. Home. The vehicle pulled away. Evie watched the cathedral slide past the window. Her parents remained on the steps. Her father's arm was around her mother. Neither of them waved. Then the church disappeared behind a turn. Evie realized she was still holding her breath. Knox looked at her. "You can take the pins out." She blinked. "What?" "Your hair. You look like it hurts." It did. Her hands rose automatically. She found the first pin and pulled it free, then another, then another. They fell into the cup holder between them with tiny metallic clicks. For several minutes, that was the only sound. Click, click, click. The city slipped by outside. Cobblestone streets became wider roads. Historic homes gave way to gas stations, bridges, low marshland, shining in the late afternoon light. Evie pulled the last pin free, and her hair came loose around her shoulders in stiff sprayed waves. She stared at the pile of pins. What happens now? Knox had opened a tablet, but he did not look at it yet. Now, you stop being publicly useful and become privately informed. Evie turned toward him. That sounds ominous. It is accurate. Are we legally married? Yes. That fast. My attorney is efficient. And the church just allowed that. The church allowed a desperate man, a betrayed woman, and a prepared attorney to solve a problem in front of God. Interpret that how you like. Evie almost smiled. Almost. Then her hands began to shake. She folded them in her lap, but Knox saw. Of course he saw. Delayed shock, he said. I'm not in shock. You married a criminal at your own wedding after exposing your fiancé and best friend. Your body is allowed to have opinions. The words should have offended her. Instead, they steadied her because they sounded like fact, not pity. Evie leaned her head back against the seat. I need to call my parents. You will. When? When you can speak without apologizing for surviving. She looked at him sharply. He was watching the road through the windshield profile, calm jaw set. You don't know anything about me. I know you were about to apologize to them for something Blake did. Evie hated that he was right. The SUV climbed onto the bridge. The harbor spread beneath them, dark blue and glittering. Wind pressed against the vehicle. In the distance, cranes stood over the port like metal giants. Knox looked toward them. That is where Blake stole from me. Evie followed his gaze. The port seemed enormous, alive with motion containers stacked like colored block ships waiting with black hulls in the water. How did he even get access? He consulted for a vendor attached to one of our logistics accounts. Small role, big ambition, weak character. Evie looked down at the ring on her finger. I thought he sold waterfront condos. He did. Badly. A tired laugh escaped her before she could stop it. It sounded wrong in the leather cabin, but Knox's mouth moved like he might have enjoyed it. The drive lasted nearly 40 minutes. By the time they turned off the main road near Mount Pleasant, the sun had lowered, turning the marsh gold. The private drive to Knox's estate was hidden behind a wall of live oaks and black iron gates. Cameras followed the SUV as it approached. The gates opened without a sound. Evie sat up. The house appeared slowly through the trees. It was not old Southern money with white columns and romantic porches. It was modern, severe, and built low against the water. Glass walls, dark stone, steel beams, a flat roofline sharp against the sky. Nothing soft, nothing accidental. Men stood near the entrance. Not guards exactly. Soldiers in better suits. The SUV stopped. Knox got out first. One of his men opened Evie's door. Humid air rushed in cooler now, carrying salt-cut grass and the faint diesel smell of boats from the water. Evie gathered her dress and stepped down. Her feet hit the gravel and pain shot through her arches. She winced. Knox looked at her shoes. Those were a poor choice for war. They were chosen for a wedding. Same problem, different weapons. She looked up at him despite herself. He was already walking toward the house. Evie followed because standing in the driveway in a wedding dress seemed worse. Inside the estate was cool enough to raise goosebumps along her arms. The foyer opened into a wide living space of gray stone floors, glass walls, and a view of the water turning black beneath the evening sky. The silence was thick, expensive, and controlled. A woman stood near a marble table. She was in her 60s, with silver hair pinned into a low bun and a black dress simple enough to be a uniform without admitting it. Her posture was perfect. Her eyes moved over Evie, once taking in the dress, the hair, the mascara, the ring. Mr. Mercer, she said. Ruth Knox replied. This is Evie. She will be staying in the primary suite. The woman gave a small nod. Mrs. Mercer. The title struck Evie harder here than it had in the church. Mrs. Mercer. Not a performance anymore. A name people in this house would use without blinking. Knox removed his cufflinks and set them on the marble table. Have her apartment cleared tonight. Anything personal goes to the east storage room until she decides what she wants kept. Anything belonging to Blake Hollis is burned or boxed for legal use, whichever is more useful. Evie turned to him. My apartment. Knox met her eyes. Blake has keys. I can change the locks. He has desperation. That opens more doors than keys. Ruth did not react. Evie suddenly felt very tired. My parents will go there. I'll have someone posted outside. Discreetly. I don't want your men scaring my family. Then I'll tell them to smile. Evie stared at him. That is not reassuring. It was not meant to be. Ruth stepped forward. If you'll come with me, Mrs. Mercer, I'll show you upstairs. Evie wanted to correct her again. She did not. The staircase floated along a glass wall overlooking the water. Every step upward made the dress heavier. Ruth walked ahead without looking back, as if women in ruined bridal gowns arrived here every Saturday. At the end of the upstairs hall, she opened double doors. The primary suite was massive and cold. A dark bed faced the windows. Beyond the glass, the marsh stretched under the fading sky. There were no photographs, no books, no scattered signs of a life. The room looked less lived in than occupied strategically. "The bath is through there," Ruth said. "There are towels, water, and a shirt on the counter. I'll have suitable clothing brought up in the morning." "Thank you," Evie said. Ruth paused at the door. Her face softened by a fraction. "There's a lock on the inside. Mr. Mercer has never used a key on a locked bedroom door in this house." Then she left. Evie stood alone. For 1 minute she did nothing. Then the first sob tore out of her so violently she bent forward. She grabbed at the skirt of the dress and sank onto the edge of the bed. The crying was ugly, breathless, humiliating. It came from somewhere below language. She cried for Blake, but not because she wanted him back. She cried for the years he had taken up inside her, for the friend Serena had pretended to be, for her parents on the church steps, for the fact that she had chosen danger and still felt less foolish than she had holding Blake's hand. When the tears stopped, her body felt hollow. She stood and reached for the zipper at the back of the dress. Her fingers missed it. She tried again. The bodice squeezed her ribs. Her shoulders ached. The lace scratched her skin. She twisted, pulled, cursed softly, then harder. The zipper would not move. The door opened. Evie spun, clutching the front of the dress. Knox stood in the doorway, holding a glass of water. His gaze took in her face, the dress, the panic in her hands. "I can't get it off," she said. The words came out smaller than she intended. Knox stepped inside and set the water on the nightstand. "Turn around." Evie hesitated. Then she turned. His footsteps made almost no sound on the rug. She felt him behind her, not touching yet. The air changed with his nearness, cedar and rain, and something darker. His fingers brushed her hair aside from the zipper. "Hold your breath." She did. He pulled the zipper down in one clean motion. The dress released her. Evie exhaled so sharply it almost became another sob. The weight loosened around her ribs. Cool air touched the skin of her back. She held the bodice against her chest and closed her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Knox stepped away. "There is water beside you. The shirt is in the bathroom. Breakfast is at 7. She turned carefully, still holding the dress. "You always give orders after helping someone?" "Yes." "At least you're consistent." His eyes moved over her face, and for a moment the room became too quiet. Consistency is underrated. He turned to leave. "Knox." He stopped with his hand on the doorframe. "Why me?" The question came out before she could dress it in pride. "You could have chosen anyone. An actress, a woman from your world, someone who understands all this." Knox looked at her for a long moment. The last light from the windows cut across his face, leaving half of it in shadow. "An actress would perform fear," he said. "You swallowed it and kept standing." Evie said nothing. He continued. "When your life burned down in front of everyone, you did not ask who would save you. You looked for somewhere to put the fire." Her fingers tightened in the loosened fabric. "That sounds like a warning." "It is." "About me." Knox's gaze held hers. "About both of us." Then he stepped out and closed the door quietly behind him. Evie stood in the middle of the room, half freed from the dress she was never supposed to wear again, listening to the silence of a house built for secrets. On her left hand, Blake's ring caught the last of the evening light. It looked small now, smaller than a promise, smaller than a mistake. The ring looked smaller in the morning. Evie noticed that before she remembered where she was. For a few still seconds, she lay beneath cool sheets that smelled like lavender soap and expensive air, staring at a ceiling crossed by pale strips of sunlight. The room was silent in a way her apartment had never been. No neighbor's television murmuring through thin walls, no pipes knocking awake, no Blake moving around the kitchen pretending he had not come home late. Then yesterday returned, the church, the closet, Serena's bracelet, Blake on his knees, Knox Mercer's hand closing over hers at the altar. Evie sat up too fast. Her body protested everywhere. Her ribs ached from the corset. Her feet throbbed. Her shoulders burned where lace had scraped the skin raw. She was wearing Knox's white dress shirt, the sleeves rolled badly around her wrists, the hem falling to the middle of her thighs. The wedding dress was gone. For a moment, that frightened her more than everything else. She stared at the empty space near the bed where she had left the heap of white silk. Someone had come in while she slept. Someone had lifted away the dress she had cried into and removed it as neatly as a crime scene. On the chair by the window sat folded clothes, black trousers, a cream sweater, simple flats. Beside them rested a note written in narrow, elegant handwriting. Breakfast is downstairs. Mr. Mercer values punctuality. No signature. Evie guessed Ruth did not believe in unnecessary things. She pushed herself out of bed and crossed to the bathroom. The marble floor was cold under her bare feet. In the mirror, she looked like a woman pulled from deep water. Her eyes were swollen. Her skin was pale. Faint red marks crossed her shoulders. A bruise had begun to bloom where Blake had grabbed her wrist, blue at the center and purple around the edges. She touched it with 2 fingers. For 3 years, Blake had never left a mark on her body. Not one she could show anyone. Evie turned on the faucet and splashed cold water over her face until her breath steadied. When she looked up again, her reflection had not improved, but it had changed. There was something harder in the eyes, something awake. The clothes fit well enough to make her uneasy. Of course, Knox's house would know her size by morning. She found the kitchen by following the smell of coffee and bacon through a corridor of glass stone and quiet men who looked away before she could decide whether they were being respectful or trained. The house felt different in daylight, less like a fortress from a nightmare, more like a place built by someone who understood attack routes better than comfort. The kitchen was enormous. Dark marble counters, steel appliances, windows looking over the marsh where early light turned the water silver. Knox sat at the far end of the island with a laptop open in front of him and a black coffee near his right hand. He wore a charcoal suit, no jacket, white shirt buttoned at the throat. His hair was damp, as if he had already showered, worked, threatened someone, and returned before she woke. He did not look up. "You are 2 minutes early." Evie poured coffee from the carafe before answering. "I was raised by a mother who believed late meant morally weak. That must have been exhausting. She also believed marrying a stranger at gunpoint was bad manners." Knox's fingers paused on the keyboard. "There was no gun pointed at you. Not visibly." He looked up then. The morning light made his eyes seem less black and more like dark glass with something moving far behind it. His gaze dropped briefly to the bruise on her wrist. Evie pulled her sleeve down. Too late. Knox closed the laptop. "I have something for you." That sentence has not gone well for me lately. He slid a thick folder across the counter. Evie stared at it. The folder looked too ordinary to contain the rest of her life. She opened it. The first page was a copy of the marriage certificate. Her name sat beside his in black ink. Evelyn Marie Carter and Knox Alexander Mercer. She read it twice. It did not become less strange. Beneath that were legal documents, bank papers, a trust agreement, a temporary security protocol, and a typed page titled Personal History. Evie lifted it. According to the document, she and Knox had met 6 months earlier at a waterfront charity gala. She had spilled champagne on his shoes. He had sent her flowers the next morning. They had kept the relationship private because she had been untangling herself from a previous engagement. Evie looked at him over the top of the paper. "I spilled champagne on your shoes. It humanizes me." "Does it? It gives you a reason to say I was charming. You are aware charming people usually smile." "I smile. You threaten people with paperwork and call it romance." His mouth moved slightly. It was not a smile, but it was close enough to be alarming. "You will memorize the timeline before tonight." Evie set the page down. "Tonight, my grandfather is arriving at his estate this afternoon. Dinner is at 8. Her stomach tightened around the first sip of coffee. "You said tomorrow." "I said we would prepare." Circumstances changed. Circumstances, meaning what Knox leaned back from the counter. "My Uncle Wade heard about the wedding before we left the church. By midnight, he had called 3 family allies and 1 reporter he thinks I do not know about. By morning, he was asking whether the marriage was legal, whether you were coerced, and whether I was losing control." Evie wrapped both hands around the mug. "So dinner is not dinner. Dinner is rarely dinner in my family. Good to know. In my family, dinner is just my mother asking if everyone has eaten enough while my father pretends not to want seconds." "That sounds pleasant." "It is, until somebody marries a Mafia boss instead of the real estate fraud she was engaged to." Knox's expression stayed still, but his eyes sharpened at the word Mafia. Evie did not apologize. She was done softening accurate things. He reached into the folder and pulled out another document. "This is the private agreement." Evie took it. The language was formal, but the meaning was clear. 1 year of public marriage. Separate personal property. A trust in her name. Protection while under Mercer authority. No obligation of physical intimacy. Public appearances as required. Mutual discretion. Penalties for deliberate exposure of the arrangement. She read the page twice. Then she looked at him. "You included a no-touching clause. You asked for one. I said it at an altar while bleeding adrenaline. You still said it." For a second, Evie could not speak. It would have been easier if he were cruel all the time. Easier if every word he spoke came with teeth. But Knox Mercer had a disturbing habit of honoring the exact line she drew, and somehow that made him more dangerous. Because monsters were not supposed to respect boundaries. They were supposed to break them. She placed the agreement on the counter. "And if I want to leave before the year is over, you can." Evie narrowed her eyes. That simple no. There it is. You can leave me. You cannot leave the consequences of having married me. Wade will still know your name. My enemies will still know your face. Blake will still be desperate. Serena may still be useful to people who want to hurt you. At Serena's name, something tightened in Evie's chest. Knox noticed. "Did she call you, Evie?" Shook her head. "My phone, on the counter beside you." Evie looked down. She had not seen it beside the folder. Her phone sat face down, fully charged, no longer in the glittering bridal case Serena had bought her. Someone had replaced it with a plain black one. She picked it up. 47 missed calls. 20 from her mother. 11 from her father. 6 from Serena. 4 from Blake. The rest from numbers she did not recognize. Her throat closed. Knox watched her. "You can call your parents after breakfast." "Ken should." Evie looked at him. "I do not need permission." "No," he said. "You need privacy and a steady voice. Ruth will take you to the garden room." The anger she had prepared for him slipped slightly off balance. She hated that. Evie set the phone down and looked back at the folder. "What exactly does your grandfather need to believe? That I married you because I wanted you, not because you needed me." "Yes, and Wade needs to believe you are not a weakness." Evie laughed once softly. I was crying into a wedding dress in your guest room last night. My room, Knox said. She blinked. What? That was my room. Evie stared at him. You put me in your room? Yes. Where did you sleep? My office. Why? Because people watch patterns. If I brought home a wife and placed her in a guest room, every servant guard and cousin with a paid informant would know the marriage was hollow before sunrise. Evie looked around the kitchen, suddenly aware of the men beyond doorways, the cameras hidden too neatly in corners, the house that felt empty but was never alone. So I'm not just acting for your grandfather. No. For everyone. Yes. The word dropped between them. Evie pushed the folder away and stood. I need to call my parents. Knox nodded toward the hallway. Ruth is waiting. Of course she was. Ruth led Evie to a glass room overlooking a narrow strip of garden and marsh grass bending in the morning wind. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Evie called her mother first. Donna answered before the first ring finished. Evie. The sound of her mother's voice broke something open. Evie closed her eyes. Hi, Mom. Oh, thank God. Where are you? Are you hurt? Your father has been calling the police and then not calling the police because no one knows what to do, and Blake's mother is saying horrible things, and Serena came by the house crying and I almost slapped her in the driveway. Evie pressed her free hand over her mouth. For some reason, the image of her tiny mother almost slapping Serena in the driveway made her want to laugh and sob at once. I'm safe. That is not an answer. I'm at Knox's house. A silence. Then Donna whispered, his house. Yes. Did he make you go? No, Evie. He didn't. I chose it. Her mother began to cry harder. Sweetheart, you were hurt. You were humiliated. People do things when they're in shock. Evie looked out at the marsh. A white bird lifted from the grass and vanished into the bright air. I know. Then come home. Home. The word should have been simple. Instead, Evie saw the apartment with Blake's jacket on the chair, Blake's shaving cream in the bathroom, Blake's name on the lease. She saw Serena curled on her couch with bare feet tucked under her, laughing at some joke Blake had made. She saw every place she had mistaken comfort for safety. I can't come home yet. Donna's breath hitched. Because he won't let you. Because I don't know where home is right now. That silenced them both. When Donna spoke again, her voice was softer. Your father wants to see you. I want to see him too. Then let us come. Evie thought of Knox saying Wade would know her name. Blake would be desperate, Serena might become useful. She hated every part of it, but the fear had shape now. It was not a fog. It was a map. Not today, Evie said. Soon. I promise. Do you love him? The question was so absurd that Evie almost answered too quickly. Instead, she opened her eyes. No. Donna released a small broken sound. Then why stay? Evie looked down at the bruise on her wrist. Because for the first time in a long time, the danger is honest. Her mother did not understand. Evie could hear that in the silence. She was not sure she understood either. After the call, she stood in the garden room until her hands stopped shaking. When she returned to the kitchen, Knox was gone. In his place sat Ruth with a small plate of eggs and toast. You should eat. I'm not hungry. That is not what I said. Evie looked at her. Ruth looked back. Evie sat. The eggs were warm. The toast was buttered. She took one bite because refusing seemed childish, then another because her body had its own opinion. Ruth poured tea into a white cup. Mr. Mercer has arranged a fitting at noon. Of course he has. You will meet Mr. Harlan Mercer tonight. He values presentation. Does everyone in this house speak in warnings? Ruth considered that. Mostly. Evie almost smiled. At noon, Ruth led her into a long room with mirrors on 3 walls and soft gray carpet underfoot. A seamstress waited with garment bags hanging from a brass rack. She was short, sharp-eyed, and held a pincushion like a weapon. "Mrs. Mercer," she said. "I'm Lydia Crane. Evie." The seamstress blinked, then nodded once. "Evie." Knox arrived 10 minutes later, talking quietly into his phone. He wore a different suit now, black with a white shirt open at the collar. He stopped near the window, ended the call, and looked at the garment bags. "Show me the green one." Lydia unzipped a bag and drew out a dress the color of deep emerald glass. Evie stared. It was beautiful in a way that felt dangerous. Long sleeves, high neckline, clean lines. The back, however, dipped low enough to make her straighten without meaning to. "No," she said. Knox looked at her. "You have not tried it on. I don't need to. That dress is missing a back. It has enough. For whom? For the room you are walking into." Evie crossed her arms. "I'm not a weapon you get to dress." "No," Knox said. "You are a target people will try to read. Clothing gives them the wrong language." She hated that it made sense. Lydia cleared her throat. "Shall we?" Evie took the dress behind the screen. The silk slid over her skin like cool water. Lydia zipped and pinned and adjusted until the dress fit as if it had been poured over her. When Evie stepped out, the room changed. Knox stopped looking at his phone. That was the first thing she noticed. Not because his expression softened. It did not. But the stillness in him sharpened. His gaze moved from her shoulders to her waist, then up to her face, and Evie felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with lace or skin. She turned toward the mirror. The woman looking back was not the bride from yesterday. This woman did not look sweet. She did not look easy. She looked expensive, composed, and impossible to comfort without permission. Evie swallowed. "I don't look like myself." Knox stepped closer, stopping behind her. "No," he said. "You look like the version of yourself Blake never wanted to meet." That struck too deep. Evie kept her eyes on the mirror. "I don't know how to do this. You already started. Humiliating my cheating fiancé in church is not the same as convincing an old crime patriarch that I belong at his table." "Do not try to belong," Knox said. "That is where outsiders fail." "Then what do I do?" "Make them wonder what I saw in you that they missed." Lydia adjusted the hem near Evie's ankle. What if they ask about Blake Knox's gaze held hers in the mirror? "Tell the truth with better posture." Evie turned slowly. "And what is the truth that he mistook your patience for permission?" The room went quiet. Evie looked at Knox, and for one dangerous second she forgot every reason she should be afraid of him. Then his phone buzzed. Whatever had opened in the air closed again. Knox glanced at the screen. "Wade has arrived early." Evie's pulse shifted. "Is that bad?" "It is never charming." "Do you ever answer a question plainly?" "Yes." When the plain answer is useful. By 7:30 that evening, Evie sat beside Knox in the back of the SUV, wearing the emerald dress, simple gold earrings Ruth had given her, and Blake's ring still on her finger. She had wanted to remove it. Knox told her not yet. "It helps the story," he said. To Evie it felt like wearing the last piece of a dead version of herself. Rain began as they crossed the bridge. Thin at first, then steady, blurring the lights of Charleston into gold streaks against the windows. Knox reviewed messages on his phone. Evie watched his reflection in the glass. "Your grandfather," she said. "Will he hate me?" "He hates most people. That is not comforting. It was not meant to be. You could lie once. I could. You asked me not to." Evie looked down at her hands. The ring flashed under the dim cabin light. "What was your grandmother like?" Knox's thumb paused on the screen. For a moment she thought he would not answer. Her name was Celia. She was quiet in public and feared in private. Feared, she remembered everything. Debts, insults, birthdays, weaknesses. Sounds efficient. She loved my grandfather more than he deserved. Evie looked at him. Did he love her? Knox stared at the phone, but the screen had gone dark. Yes. The answer was plain enough to feel like a door closing. The Mercer family estate rose from the marsh like something that had been waiting for them long before they were born. It was old brick dark windows, white columns, and live oaks dripping with Spanish moss. Warm light glowed from inside, but nothing about it felt welcoming. A man opened Evie's door with an umbrella. The rain smelled of mud salt and wet leaves. Knox came around the vehicle and offered his arm. Evie looked at it. Is this for show? Yes. At least he was honest. She took it. His arm was solid beneath her hand. The warmth of him moved through the black wool of his suit. As they climbed the steps, Knox lowered his voice. Do not look down. Do not explain more than necessary. Wade will smile when he means to cut. Harlan will insult you to see if you bleed. And you, I will be beside you. That was not the question. I know. The front door opened before they knocked. Inside, the foyer smelled of cigar smoke, lemon polish, and roasted meat. A chandelier hung over them, old crystal, throwing fractured light across dark wood walls. Portraits lined the staircase. Men with Mercer eyes, women with Mercer mouths, children dressed like small heirs to large sins. A butler took Knox's coat. He did not look at Evie directly. Knox led her down a hallway toward voices. The dining room waited at the end. At the head of the long table sat Harlan Mercer. He was smaller than Evie expected. Thin, sunken, draped in a dark suit with a silver cane resting across his knees. Clear tubes ran beneath his nose, attached to an oxygen machine humming softly beside his chair. His skin had the color and texture of old paper, but his eyes were alive, sharp, black, merciless. To his left sat Wade Mercer. Wade was broader than Knox, older, polished in a way that felt oily. His gray suit looked expensive and slightly too tight. A gold ring gleamed on one finger. His smile arrived before his warmth, and neither seemed sincere. Knox Harlan rasped, You are late. We are on time. I decided you were late 10 minutes ago. Knox guided Evie forward. Grandfather, this is my wife. Evie. The word wife moved through the room. Harlan looked her over slowly. Evie felt every inch of the emerald dress, the bare skin of her back, the ring on her finger, the bruise hidden beneath makeup on her wrist. She remembered Knox's voice. Do not look down. So she did not. Harlan's mouth twitched. Not a Charleston girl. No, sir, Evie said. Columbia originally. Charleston by stubbornness and rent increases. Wade chuckled into his drink. Funny. That will help. I hear yesterday was quite the comedy. Knox went still beside her. Evie felt it through his arm. Wade leaned back. A bride walks into a church with one groom and leaves with another. Sounds like something my third wife would have tried if she had better timing. Evie's face warmed, but the heat was not shame. It was anger, clean and familiar now. She released Knox's arm. Knox did not stop her. Evie stepped closer to the table. My fiancé was cheating with my maid of honor in a coat closet while my father waited to walk me down the aisle, she said. I did not change grooms for entertainment. I corrected a public error. Wade's smile thinned. Evie turned to Harlan. Knox did not rescue me. He offered terms. I accepted them because I prefer dangerous men who admit what they are over weak men who hide behind flowers. The room fell silent. The oxygen machine hummed. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Harlan stared at her so long Evie felt sweat gather at the base of her spine. Then he began to laugh. It was not a kind laugh. It was dry, rough, and ugly, but it was real. "She has teeth," Harlan said. Wade looked away. Knox pulled out the chair beside his own. Evie sat before her knees could betray her. Dinner began. Plates arrived with perfect timing. Oysters, then roasted duck, then greens bitter enough to punish the tongue. Evie ate because Ruth's voice seemed to echo in her head. "You should eat." Not because she was hungry, but because trembling at the Mercer table felt like an invitation for someone to bite. Harlan asked questions without warning. "How long did you love the other one?" Evie set down her fork. "Too long." "That is not a number." "No, sir." "It is an admission." Harlan watched her. "Do you still know?" Fast answer. Late answer. Knox said nothing, but she felt his attention settle beside her. Wade swirled wine in his glass. "And now you love Knox." Evie looked at him. "I married him yesterday." "So, no, I did not say that." "You are clever." "No," Evie said. "I am careful." Wade's smile returned. "Careful women do not marry Mercers." Evie picked up her wineglass. "Maybe I was tired of being careful for men who did not deserve it." Harlan laughed again, softer this time. Wade's jaw tightened. The meal stretched on like a trial disguised as hospitality. Wade pressed Knox about port contracts, missing shipments, delayed signatures. Knox answered each question with calm precision. He never raised his voice. He never hurried. He made Wade look emotional by refusing to become so himself. Evie watched the room as much as she listened. Harlan was old, but no one ignored him. Every servant moved around him carefully. Wade spoke too much when he wanted control. Knox spoke least and owned the most silence. At one point, Harlan pushed his plate away and looked at Evie. "Do you know what wives are in this family?" Evie felt Knox turn toward her. She did not look at him. "No, sir." "Leverage," Wade said smoothly. Harlan tapped his cane once against the floor. "Quiet." Wade's eyes hardened. Harlan leaned forward, breath rattling. "Wives are memory. Men like my grandson build empires by cutting away what does not serve them. A wife remembers what kind of man remains after the cutting." Evie did not know what to say, so she told the truth. "That sounds lonely." The whole table went still. Even Knox. Harlan's eyes narrowed. For a moment, Evie was certain she had gone too far. Then Harlan looked toward the portrait above the mantel. A young woman stood in oil paint beside a much younger Harlan, her dark hair pinned high, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "My Celia used to say that." His voice had changed. Not softened exactly. Lowered. Wade looked irritated. Knox looked at the portrait, then away. Harlan's gaze returned to Evie. "After dinner, you will walk with me." Knox set down his glass. "No." Harlan's cane struck the floor. "I did not ask you." The silence hardened. Evie looked at Knox. His jaw was tight. She placed her hand lightly on the table, not touching him, just near enough for him to see. "I'll walk." His eyes moved to hers. A warning lived there. She gave him the smallest nod. After dessert, Harlan rose with the help of his cane and no one else. Evie stood as well. Knox stood immediately, but Harlan pointed the cane at him. "Sit." Knox did not sit. Evie touched his sleeve. "I'll be fine. That is not guaranteed." "No," she said quietly. "But I asked you not to blindfold me." For a long moment he looked at her. Then he stepped back. Harlan led her to the library at the rear of the house. The room smelled of leather dust and old smoke. Books lined the walls. Family photographs crowded the mantel. Rain streaked the windows black. Harlan lowered himself into a chair with a sharp breath. Evie remained standing. "You may sit," he said. "I'm all right." "No, you are not. But pride is useful at first." Evie sat. Harlan studied her. "You know this marriage is a bargain?" "Yes." "You know my grandson is using you?" "Yes." "You know he will not love you simply because you are brave." The words hit harder than she expected. Evie folded her hands in her lap. "I didn't ask him to." "Good. Asking Knox Mercer for softness is like asking the tide to apologize." Evie looked toward the rain-dark window. "Did Celia ask you?" Harlan went still. The question had slipped out before fear could stop it. When he spoke, his voice was rougher. Celia demanded, "There is a difference." Evie looked back at him. "And did you give it?" "Not enough." The honesty startled her. Harlan's eyes moved to her left hand. "That ring is not his." "No." "Why wear it?" "Knox said it helped the story." "And what do you say?" Evie looked down at the diamond. Under the library lamp, it looked dull. "I say I'm tired of carrying proof that another man knew my size but not my worth." Harlan watched her. Then he smiled just slightly. "There. That is the woman I wanted to meet." A chill moved over Evie's skin. "Why?" "Because Wade will come for you first, not Knox. You. Men like Wade do not strike stone when there is glass nearby." "I'm not glass." "No," Harlan said. "But you are new." The door opened without a knock. Wade stood there, smiling. "Sorry to interrupt. Knox is asking for his bride." Harlan's expression turned cold. "I doubt that." Wade's eyes slid to Evie. "Then maybe I was asking for her." The air changed. Evie stood slowly. Harlan's fingers tightened around his cane, but Evie spoke first. "If you need my attention, Mr. Mercer, you can ask for it at the table. Following women into libraries feels desperate." Wade's smile did not move, but his eyes went flat. "Careful, sweetheart." Evie stepped toward the door. "I was. Then yesterday happened." She walked past him into the hall. Knox was already there. His gaze moved from her face to Wade's, then to the space between them. He understood enough without asking. "Problem," Knox said. Wade lifted both hands. "Just welcoming the new bride." Knox smiled. It was the first true smile Evie had seen from him. It was terrifying. "Do not welcome what is mine without permission." Evie should have hated the possessive words. Part of her did. But another part heard the threat beneath them and understood it was not aimed at her. Wade's face tightened. Harlan appeared behind them, leaning heavily on his cane. "Enough. You all make the house smell young and stupid." The moment broke. Coats were brought. Goodbyes were exchanged with the careful manners of people who would rather draw blood. At the front door, Harlan caught Evie's wrist lightly. Not the bruised one. "Mrs. Mercer," he said. Evie looked at him. "Yes." "You are either the best lie Knox ever told, or the first truth he has dragged into this family in years." She did not know how to answer. Harlan released her. "Try not to die before I decide." Outside, the rain had thickened. Knox opened the SUV door himself this time. Evie gathered the emerald skirt and climbed inside. When Knox joined her, the door shut out the wet air and the watchful windows of the Mercer mansion. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The SUV rolled down the long drive between the dripping oaks. Evie looked at her hand. Blake's ring sat there bright and wrong. She twisted it once. Knox noticed. "Leave it until we reach home." She looked at him. "No." His gaze sharpened. Evie pulled the ring off. It resisted at the knuckle, then slipped free. Her finger looked pale without it. Knox watched in silence as she held the ring in her palm. "I am not wearing his mistake to make your story easier," she said. The rain moved over the windows like dark fingers. Knox leaned back slightly. "Fair, that was all. No argument, no command, no threat, just fair." Evie closed her fist around the ring and looked out at the road ahead. Behind them, the Mercer mansion disappeared into rain and moss and old blood. Beside her, Knox sat quiet as a loaded gun. For the first time since the church, Evie did not feel like a bride caught between two men. She felt like a woman learning the weight of her own name. The road back to the Mercer estate shone black beneath the rain. Evie sat with Blake's ring closed inside her fist, feeling the small teeth of the setting press into her palm. It was strange how little it weighed now. Yesterday that ring had been the center of a life, a promise, a photograph waiting to happen, a name she had practiced writing once on the back of an envelope when she thought no one was watching. Now it was just metal and a poor decision with a diamond on top. Knox sat beside her in silence. The passing streetlights moved over his face in slow gold flashes, then vanished into shadow. His hands rested loosely on his thighs. He looked calm, but Evie had spent enough time beside him now to understand that calm was not the absence of violence in Knox Mercer. It was where he kept it. The SUV crossed the bridge into Charleston. Rain slid down the tinted windows, turning the city into watercolor. The port cranes stood in the distance, tall and skeletal against the dark. Evie looked at them and remembered what Knox had said. "That is where Blake stole from me." She opened her hand and stared at the ring. What happens to him now? Knox did not ask who. Blake. She nodded. The name tasted old already. Knox looked out the window. His primary accounts were frozen this afternoon. Evie's fingers tightened around the ring. "You already started." "I started before the ceremony ended." She turned toward him. "While we were still in the church." "Yes." The answer was so clean that it frightened her. Evie thought of Blake on his knees, face-wet hands shaking. She had hated him then. She still hated him now, but hearing the machinery of Knox's revenge moving so quietly beneath everything made her stomach tighten. What else? Knox leaned back. The brokerage where he kept his stolen funds received notice of a fraud investigation. His real estate license is under review. The company that employed him terminated his contract for financial misconduct. The car was repossessed from the hotel garage where he tried to hide it. Evie stared at him. He tried to hide the car. Men like Blake always protect the loudest thing they bought with stolen money. There was no satisfaction in Knox's voice. That almost made it worse. He was not bragging. He was reporting He was not bragging. He was weather. Evie looked down at the ring again. And his apartment? The lease was never his to protect. He missed payments before you knew there were payments to miss. The landlord served notice this evening. Evie's breath caught. "My things are there. Ruth's people removed them. My mother could have gone there." "She did." Evie sat straighter. What Knox finally turned to her. "Your father drove her. They arrived after my men had already entered. Ruth spoke with them." Evie's throat went tight. "And you did not tell me you were surviving dinner with my family." "I should have known." "Yes," Knox said. The honesty hit harder than an excuse would have. Evie blinked at him. Yes. I should have told you when we got in the car. I was waiting until you asked about Blake. That is not the same as honesty." "No," he said. "It is strategy. I asked you not to do that to me." A muscle moved in his jaw. "I know." The SUV carried them through rain and darkness. The partition raised the driver silent ahead of them. Evie could hear the soft hiss of tires over wet asphalt. Her anger was not hot. It was sharper than that. more precise. My parents watched strangers remove my life from the apartment I shared with Blake. Yes. Did they know those men worked for you? Yes. Did my father try to hit anyone? Knox's mouth moved faintly. He considered it. Despite herself, Evie almost smiled. Then the hurt returned. You should have told me. Knox looked at her for a long moment. You are right. The words were simple. No performance, no apology dressed in pride. Evie did not know what to do with them, so she looked away. Outside Charleston blurred past, restaurants glowing warm against the rain, couples hurrying under umbrellas, a woman laughing as a man lifted his jacket over both their heads, ordinary life moving carelessly beside the wreckage of hers. What did Ruth say to them? Evie asked. That you were safe, that you would call tomorrow, that everything belonging to you would be delivered to a secure location until you decide where it goes. My mother must hate me. She is afraid. That is not better. No, Knox said. It is usually love under pressure. Evie glanced at him. That sounds almost human. It happens. She looked at his hands. There was a thin scar across one knuckle. She had not noticed it before. His hands were beautiful in a brutal way. Large, controlled, capable of signing a bank order or breaking a bone with equal patience. What about Serena Knox's eyes changed? Not much. Enough. No movement yet. You are watching her. Yes. Evie swallowed. She was my best friend. I know. She knew everything about me. My fears, my mother's health scare. The time I thought Blake was pulling away and she told me I was lucky to have a man worth missing. Her voice cracked on the last word. Evie hated it. Knox did not reach for her. He did not soften his face into pity. He only listened, and that was almost harder. She sat on my couch, Evie said. She drank my wine. She helped me choose vows. She told me to wear my hair up because Blake liked my neck. Rain struck harder against the roof. Knox's voice was quiet. Do you want her punished? Evie turned to him. The answer should have been easy. Yes. Yes, ruin her too. Make her cry the way Evie had cried. Make her feel exposed. Make her understand that betrayal has teeth. But Serena's face rose in her mind. College dorm bathroom, cheap mascara, bare feet on cold tile. Serena holding Evie after her first bad breakup. Serena laughing with a mouthful of pizza at 2 a.m. Serena lying in a champagne dress while Evie walked toward a man who had never loved her properly. I don't know, Evie said. Knox nodded once. That is allowed. Is it? In this house, not knowing is better than pretending certainty. She looked at him carefully. That sounds like something you learned the hard way. He did not answer. The estate gates opened ahead of them, black iron parting without sound. The SUV rolled up the private drive. Lights glowed low along the stone path. Men stood beneath the overhang near the entrance, dark shapes in raincoats, their faces turned toward the vehicle. Home Knox had called it yesterday. Evie wondered how long a place had to hold you before the word stopped sounding like a trap. The SUV stopped. Knox stepped out first. This time he opened her door himself. Evie gathered the emerald dress and climbed out. The rain had cooled the night and the air smelled of marsh water and wet grass. Knox offered his hand. She looked at it, then placed Blake's ring in his palm instead. His fingers closed around it. Done with it, he asked. Done wearing it. Knox looked at the ring, then slipped it into his pocket. They walked inside. The foyer was brighter than when they had left. Ruth stood near the staircase, composed as always, but there was tension around her mouth. Beside her stood one of Knox's men, the broad one with close-cropped hair and a broken nose. Evie had heard someone call him Grant. Knox stopped. What happened? Ruth held out a cream-colored envelope. It was left at the south gate 20 minutes ago. Knox took it. Evie felt the house change around her. The men near the doors became still. Grant shifted slightly one hand near the inside of his jacket. Ruth stepped closer to Evie without looking as though she had moved at all. Knox opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph. He stared at it. His face emptied. Evie reached for the photo before she could stop herself. Knox let her take it. The image was clear. Too clear. Evie stood in the emerald dress at Harlan Mercer's estate. Her head turned slightly. Knox beside her. The photo had been taken through rain from beyond the property line, or maybe from inside the trees. Across the bottom, written in black marker, were 6 words. A borrowed wife is still a weakness. Cold moved through Evie's body so fast it felt like falling. Ruth inhaled quietly. Grant cursed under his breath. Knox took the photo back. Who saw this arrive? Eastgate camera caught a black sedan, Grant said. Plates were covered. Driver never stepped out. Threw it through the bars and reversed before the guard reached the road. Pull the footage. Already done. Send it to Luca. Done. Knox looked at Ruth. Where are her belongings? East storage. Sealed and logged. Move what she needs to the room beside mine. Evie turned to him. No. Everyone went silent. Even the rain against the glass seemed quieter. Knox looked at her. This is not the moment. It is exactly the moment. His voice lowered. Someone photographed you at my grandfather's estate and delivered a threat to my gate. I can read. Then read the threat correctly. I did. It says I am leverage, not luggage. Grant looked away quickly. Ruth's mouth moved as if she might approve, though she said nothing. Knox stepped closer. His voice remained quiet, which made it worse. You are moving closer to my rooms because the East Wing has reinforced access private stairs and a guard line that can be closed in 6 seconds. Then say that. I just did. No, Evie said. You gave an order first. You explained after I refused. His eyes held hers. The whole room seemed to wait for him to decide what kind of husband he was going to be. At last, Knox looked toward Ruth. Prepare the East Wing suite. Ask Mrs. Mercer which belongings she wants moved. Ruth nodded. Yes, sir. Evie's pulse was still fast. Knox looked back at her. Is that acceptable? It should not have mattered. It did. Yes. Grant cleared his throat. There is more. Knox turned. Grant handed him a phone sealed inside a plastic evidence bag. It was found with the envelope. Evie's stomach tightened. She knew that glittering case, even through the plastic. That's Serena's phone? Knox's gaze moved to Evie. You are sure? Yes. Her voice felt far away. I bought that case for her birthday. Grant said, it is locked, but there is one visible notification on the screen. He held it up. A message preview glowed against the glass. Tell Evie I still know what Blake stole. Evie could not breathe. Knox took the phone. His expression did not shift, but the air around him went colder. Where is Serena? Grant hesitated. Missing since this afternoon. The word missing moved through the foyer like smoke. Evie remembered Serena's tears at the church, the white face, the whispered apology, the way she had vanished from Evie's life as quickly as a hand pulled from flame. She knows something, Evie said. Knox looked at the phone. Apparently. Something about Blake. Or something Blake wanted hidden. Evie took a step toward him. We have to find her. Knox's eyes lifted. We will. No. Not we, as in your men disappear into the night and I wait behind glass. We, as in you, tell me what is happening. This is not a discussion for the foyer. Then pick a room. A flicker crossed his face. Not anger. Something closer to recognition. "Office," he said. Ruth touched Evie's arm before she followed. "Tea." Evie almost laughed. The sound came out thin. "Does tea help with Mafia threats?" "Not usually," Ruth said, "but it gives the hands something to do." Evie nodded. The office looked like Knox. Dark wood, clean lines, no clutter, no photographs, except one old black and white image turned slightly away on the shelf. Rain struck the windows behind his desk. Grant remained outside the door. Ruth brought tea on a silver tray and left without a word. Knox placed Serena's phone, the photograph, and Blake's ring on the desk. Evie stared at the three objects. Her old life reduced to evidence. What did Blake steal besides money, she asked. Knox leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "That is what I intend to find out. You said he moved $2.8 million through a port account." "He did, and Serena says she knows what he stole." "Yes, so maybe money was not the only thing." Knox watched her. Evie looked at the photograph again. "Wade could have sent this." "He could. But Serena's phone changes that." "Yes. Unless Wade has Serena." Knox's silence answered before he did. "It is possible." Evie sat down because her knees were suddenly unreliable. For all her anger, for all the betrayal, Serena becoming a body in someone else's game twisted something inside her. "I hated her this morning," Evie whispered. Knox said nothing. "I hated her at the church, in the car. When I thought about her crying in my parents' driveway, I wanted to hate her more." She looked up. "But I don't want her dead." Knox's voice was low. "Good." She laughed once bitterly. "Good. It means they have not taken that from you yet." Evie looked at him. "And what have they taken from you?" The question landed too close. She saw it in the way his jaw tightened. For a moment, Knox looked toward the shelf, toward the black and white photograph turned partly away. Then he reached for Serena's phone instead. Blake had access to shipping schedules, vendor payments, and container routing. Money was the obvious theft. If he took data names, cargo information, or customs windows, that becomes more complicated, more dangerous. Yes. Dangerous for you, for anyone attached to the port. Evie absorbed that. Attached, that now included her. Did Blake know who you were when he stole from you? He knew enough to be afraid after, but not enough before. Greed makes people illiterate. Evie looked at the phone. If Serena knew, why not tell me? Knox's eyes were hard. Shame, fear, loyalty to Blake, self-preservation. Pick one. Evie thought of Serena telling her Blake adored her. She closed her eyes. Maybe she tried. Knox did not answer. Evie opened her eyes. What you want to find mercy for her. I want the truth. You want both. Is that a crime in this house? No, Knox said. It is a vulnerability. The word should have made her angry. Instead, it made her tired. Evie stood and walked to the window. Beyond the glass, security lights cut pale circles into the rain. Somewhere out there, a person had stood close enough to leave a threat. Close enough to prove the walls were not as absolute as they looked. Behind her, Knox spoke. I need to move you tonight. I know. She kept looking outside. I am not asking because I want control. I know that too. His reflection appeared in the glass behind hers. Do you? Evie looked at their double image, her in emerald silk bare finger still pale where Blake's ring had been. Knox in black still as a warning. I know you understand protection better than comfort. He was quiet for a moment. That is fair. She turned. I need something from you. Name it. Do not make me helpless in the name of keeping me alive. Knox held her gaze. I can teach you the house. Exits, codes, guards, protocols. Tonight. You need rest. I need not to lie in bed imagining someone outside the window. His eyes moved over her face. Fine. Fine. You learn tonight. He opened the office door and spoke to Grant. Bring the East Wing plans and get Luca on the line. Mrs. Mercer is being briefed. Grant's eyebrows lifted slightly. Then he nodded. Yes, sir. For the next hour, Evie learned the shape of the cage. Not the pretty version guests saw. The real one. Knox walked her through corridors and stairwells, hidden doors, and camera blind spots, safe rooms behind bookcases, panic buttons beneath tables, a private stair near his office, a reinforced hall that could seal the East Wing from the rest of the house. He introduced guards by name. Grant Luca Miles Theo. He told her which men had been with him for 10 years and which were new enough to watch twice. Evie listened until fear became information. Information was better. Information had edges. When they reached the room beside Knox's, Ruth was waiting. A few of Evie's belongings had been placed neatly on a chair. Her worn paperback, her own hairbrush, a sweater from her apartment, her mother's framed Christmas card photo from last year. The sight of ordinary things in that room nearly broke her. Ruth pretended not to notice. I'll bring more tomorrow once you decide. Thank you, Evie said. Ruth nodded and left. Knox stood at the doorway. I will be across the hall. Evie looked at the bed, the windows, the locked terrace doors. Do you sleep occasionally? That explains your personality. His mouth almost curved. Almost. Evie walked to the dresser and opened her hand. For a second, she expected Blake's ring to be there. Then she remembered it was on Knox's desk. Her finger was bare. Knox noticed. He reached into his pocket and took out a small velvet box. Evie stared. If that is another legal document, I might scream. It is not. He placed the box on the dresser and opened it. Inside was a plain platinum band. No diamond, no flourish, no attempt to dazzle, just a circle of bright metal. Evie looked at him. What is this A choice? Her chest tightened. You keep using that word like it's simple. It is not. Then why give it to me? Because Blake gave you a symbol and betrayed it. I need you to have one you can decide whether to wear. Evie looked down at the band. Is it part of the act? Yes. And beyond that, Knox's eyes held hers. That depends on what you make it. The room went quiet. Outside, thunder rolled over the marsh. Evie picked up the ring. It was heavier than she expected. Warmer too, though that was impossible. She held it between her fingers and thought of Blake's ring all sparkle and failure. She thought of Serena's phone in a plastic bag. She thought of her father on the church steps, her mother's voice on the phone, Harlan's warning in the library. She thought of Knox correcting her name at the altar. Evie did not put the ring on, not yet. Knox saw that and nodded once as if he approved of her not giving him anything too easily. He turned to leave. Knox. He stopped. She looked at him through the dim light. Was any part of yesterday real? His hand rested on the door frame. For once, he did not answer quickly. The betrayal was real, he said. Your anger was real. The threat tonight is real. Evie waited. Knox's gaze moved to the ring in her hand. And when I kissed your cheek instead of your mouth, that was real too. The words moved through her quietly deeper than they should have. He left before she could answer. The door closed. Evie stood alone in the East Wing bedroom with a platinum ring in her palm and rain tapping against glass that could stop bullets. Yesterday morning she had wanted a safe life. Now safety had gates guards, hidden staircases, and a husband feared by men who frightened everyone else. She walked to the window and looked out at the dark marsh. Somewhere beyond the lights, Serena was missing. Blake had stolen more than money. Wade was smiling in rooms where Evie's name had become useful. Knox was across the hall, close enough to hear if her door opened. Evie lifted the platinum band. For the first time since the church, she did not feel like a woman waiting to be rescued. She felt like a woman standing at the edge of something dark, holding the first true weapon anyone had ever offered her. The ring slid onto her finger, not as a promise, as a warning.